Let's do a roundup of a few different grimdark characters from over the past month, with a new guard Commissar, a store anniversary Kahl model, and a fun new Heresy Esoterist. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd just do a roundup of a few miniatures that Games Workshop's previewed, ones that I've found kind of interesting but maybe just aren't quite enough to warrant a whole video all by themselves. Let's talk about the Kahl anniversary miniature that Games Workshop previewed a month back, and then talk about two more from this week, a new guard Commissar and a new Heresy Esoterist that would be a pretty ideal stand-in for a Chaos Sorcerer. First up, we'll start with the Votann, and this miniature's Kahl Yacht Grendok, who is a miniature that they previewed around about a month ago. Apparently one of Games Workshop's store anniversary miniature offerings, where supply of these is a bit on the limited side. You can only actually order them around the time of the store's anniversary. I think it's the same week, though it might be the same day. Basically, Games Workshop uses these as a bit of an incentive to actually draw people into their brick and mortar stores, though it does mean that miniatures released this way are kind of hard to obtain, just aren't very practical for the vast majority of people, both being limited by time and location. I'd say the miniature itself looks nice enough as another little HQ choice for the Leagues of Votann. They've given this guy a name, he's Kahl Yacht Grendok apparently, and I'd say he's kind of a subtle variation on the standard Kahl model, a bit of reposing, a weapon swap and a head swap, but not really anything too revolutionary besides that. It looks like his Autok pattern Stormbolter thing also is belt fed as well, rather than more drum fed like the standard Kahl model, so I guess that is another quite nice touch. It is kind of interesting that the weapon loadout they've given him isn't actually a technically game legal one from the codex at the moment. I did feel like that was a bit of a weird choice by them. The main kit does come with a sword, axe and gauntlet, but the gauntlet and the axe are the only ones that you can actually run rules wise on the standard Kahl. The sword only appears to be there so you can run Uthar the Destined, the named character that you can build from the standard Kahl kit, though there aren't any rules for the sword on the generic one. It's not exactly the biggest deal in the world, to be honest. If you wanted this model, I'd just run the sword as an axe. It's not exactly the biggest leap of the imagination with a big plasma blade, though apparently he will be getting a legend-style datasheet that ships with him. Might have a few fun special rules, maybe a relic profile for his gun and sword perhaps, but wouldn't actually be considered part of mainline match play for balance and things. I'd guess that his current price will probably be the same as the standard Kahl at the moment, £24, €31.50 or $38. As normal with Games Workshop characters, they do charge quite a premium, despite these Votann being quite small miniatures. Kind of interesting that the Age of Sigmar alternative to him is a different style of dwarf as well, a Caradon Overlord. I guess that's always an option if you're converting some Leagues of Votann with a very different aesthetic. Moving on, earlier this week they showed off a new Commissar sculpt, and again unfortunately this isn't going to be the easiest one to get a hold of, it's going to be one of their event exclusive miniatures. Again, they seem to have a model budget where they just have a couple of extra miniatures to create a bit more excitement around their events and attending them, I guess, though you still would have to pay for them. They gave examples of when these would be available: Warhammer Fest, the World Championships Tournament Series, and the US Open tournaments, though I'd guess that they'd pop up at other events where Games Workshop actually brings a presence along themselves, though I'm not sure if you'd be guaranteed to get one if they didn't bring enough supply along, I suppose. Usually with these sort of event miniatures, they tend to have quite good resale value online, just because Games Workshop's created a supply and demand problem. People want the miniature, but almost no one can get it besides the people who actually turn up to their things in person. I guess theoretically, even if you didn't particularly want the miniature, this would probably resell for more than you paid for it, if you did happen to be at one of their events with a chance to get one. In general, I'd say the miniature for this one is really quite a cool one. A grim and dour-faced Commissar holding his bolt pistol aloft, clutching a book that he's holding behind his back. I'd guess meting out the Emperor's justice either to the enemy or potentially to any luckless Imperial Guardsmen who aren't feeling too brave today. Generally I think it's pretty nicely executed, and it's kind of similar to one of their older sculpts of Commissars that they had. It does actually look like those resurrected resin and metal Commissars are now up for their made-to-order window that they were doing, so you've got a chance to pick up some older sculpts at the moment for a bit before they go away again. In general, the majority of the reactions that I've seen online, though, are just generally lamenting that this guy isn't the standard Commissar that they released, instead of the one with the power sword and the kind of passive pose that's down in the picture on the bottom left. That one's still not released yet. I guess it'll be coming alongside the Wave 2 of the Imperial Guard release whenever that gets there. But in general, out of the new Guard miniatures, it was one of the models that people weren't the biggest fan of, to be honest. I think he certainly does the job and looks like a Commissar, but perhaps is less exciting than the vast majority of Commissar sculpts that they've had poses for in the past. Overall, I'd say they've done pretty well with this guy's sculpt, but I'm sure it's going to irritate at least a few people that most people aren't going to be able to get one of these. Finally, and for a new miniature that Games Workshop's previewed today, here we have a Horus Heresy Esoterist, this guy basically being one of their Psychotype figures, the librarians having been outlawed by the Emperor at one point, but when the Horus Heresy really got going, a bunch of the legions reverted back to using Psychers once more, officially or unofficially, and certainly all the traitor ones who didn't really care what the Emperor had to say. A fair few of their more generic miniatures generally seem to have been aimed at miniatures that can either be usable by the Loyalists or the Heretics, though I think that this one's maybe just a little bit weird in that regard, as he's got the 8-pointed Star of Chaos on that staff, plus the kind of Eye of Horus symbol. But it's just maybe a bit weird that compared with the rest of the model, there's not really all that much else that really signifies him as Chaos or anything. I guess that term slung on his back does have a couple of pointy bits on it, though I'm not sure that'd be enough to fully denote him as a traitor irredeemably for me. I guess if you did want to field it with one of the Loyalist legions, you could potentially change the head of the staff, perhaps, though it might be a little bit fiddly as it is apparently a resin miniature. Kind of a shame that they don't have a few more plastic options coming for Heresy, at least for the more generic options like this. But after the first few initial releases of plastic characters, it does seem that pretty much everything else is remaining resin, at least in terms of the centrepiece front. Judging by Forge World's current prices, that would probably be around about £28, $43 or €35. Could be a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on what class they decide to put this guy in. I feel like he could be a potentially pretty interesting model for Warhammer 40k as well. Looks like he'd make really quite an effective psycho for perhaps some of the more militaristic focused Chaos Legions. Perhaps things like Alpha Legion or Iron Warriors in particular, who I suspect their sorcerers might be a bit more practical and pragmatic, as opposed to more ritualistic zealots. I feel like the miniature itself is really quite a cool one, to be honest, a nice blend of the arcane and the practical. It appears to have a head swap with the beaky Corvus head as an option instead of the hooded head. I quite like his psychic hood type thing appears to be mounted on his power pack on the back of him. That's something that we haven't seen too much on Space Marines, I think, and I think it looks rather cool. I must admit one of the most standout things for the miniature though is the rather interesting hand gesture that he's doing. I'm sure he's just summoning some arcane spirits to help him out, or crushing some enemies with his psychic might, but he does look like he's being rather a rude Space Marine there, and he could certainly do something with that index finger to make him look even ruder. So anyway, let me know what you make of this trio of 40k characters. Are there any of these that you want to try and add to your army? And would you ideally want either of the exclusive ones to be on sale directly from Games Workshop, as opposed to being kind of annoying to get? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that links down in the video description if you'd like to help keep these videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.